The Merlot hit my face before I could process what was happening. 1 second, I was sitting across from Koo Majok in the kind of restaurant where even the silence costs money. The next, I was drowning in cheap wine and expensive humiliation as my ex-boyfriend's voice ricocheted off crystal chandeliers. You think you can just replace me, Natasha? With him? Kojo's finger jabbed toward Koo like a weapon. The entire dining room froze. Servers stopped mid-pour. A woman's fork clattered against fine china. I felt the wine sliding down my neck, staining the black silk dress I'd spent 3 paychecks on, and all I could think was, this is it. This is how I die. Not from Kojo's fists, but from pure shame. But when I finally looked at Koo Majok, he wasn't angry. He was smiling. Not a friendly smile, not even an amused smile. It was the kind of smile that makes your survival instincts scream run. Except I couldn't tell if I should be running from Kojo or from the man who was now wiping Merlot off his cheekbone with a monogrammed silk handkerchief, his eyes never leaving my ex's face. That's when the men in black suits materialized from the shadows. Kojo was still screaming when Koo finally spoke. Your tie is crooked, that's what he said. Not to Kojo, to one of the men in black suits who'd appeared like smoke. The man adjusted his tie immediately, his face expressionless. Meanwhile, my ex was working himself into a frenzy, grabbing at my wrist across the table. You're coming home, Natasha? I don't care who this asshole thinks he. Koo raised one finger. Just one. The movement was so small I almost missed it, but the reaction wasn't small at all. Two men peeled Kojo's hand off my wrist with the kind of precision that made me think of surgeons, not bouncers. No yelling, no struggle that lasted more than 3 seconds. Kojo's feet left the floor, and suddenly he was moving backward toward the exit like he was on rails. You're dead. Kojo's voice cracked as the restaurant doors swallowed him. You hear me? Both of you are. The doors closed. The threat died mid-sentence. Koo reached for his wine glass, the one that hadn't been thrown, and took a slow sip. Then he looked at me for the first time since Kojo had arrived, his dark eyes scanning my ruined dress. You're shivering, he said quietly. Would you like my jacket, or would you prefer to leave? I chose to leave, not because I wanted to, but because sitting in that restaurant, soaked in wine, while everyone pretended not to stare, felt like drowning in slow motion. Koo didn't argue. He simply stood, placed $300 bills on the table without counting them, and offered me his arm like we were at a charity gala instead of a crime scene. The car waiting outside wasn't a car. It was a statement. Black, sleek, and so quiet I didn't hear the engine until we were already moving. The driver didn't ask where we were going. He just drove. There's a boutique that owes me a favor, Koo said, his voice cutting through my spiral of humiliation. They'll have something for you. I wanted to say I could just go home and change. I wanted to say I didn't need his help. But my apartment was 40 minutes away, and the wine was starting to dry, sticky and cold against my skin. Thank you, I whispered instead. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker behind those dark eyes. You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Natasha. Except this wasn't basic decency. Basic decency was offering me a napkin. This was a private car, a mystery boutique, and a man who moved through the world like he owned every room he entered. The boutique was the kind of place that didn't have prices in the window, the kind where a woman in head-to-toe black appeared the second we walked through the door, took one look at my ruined dress, and said, "Of course, Mr. Majok, right this way." She led me to a dressing room that was bigger than my bedroom. Within minutes, dresses appeared on velvet hangers, deep emerald silk, midnight blue satin, a black number with a neckline that would have made my mother faint. Each one probably cost more than my rent. Pick whichever one makes you feel like yourself again, Koo said from somewhere outside the curtain. That was the problem. I didn't know who myself was anymore. The woman who'd spent 8 months building a life without Kojo? The woman who'd agreed to this blind date because her best friend swore Koo Majok was different? Or this new woman, standing in wine-stained silk while a stranger's money bought her dignity back? I chose the emerald dress because it reminded me of my mother's favorite color. Because it had sleeves that covered the finger-shaped bruises on my upper arm that Kojo had left 3 weeks ago during one of his let's talk ambushes. Because when I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. When I stepped out, Koo was examining a display of silk ties with the same focus he'd used when his men removed Kojo from the restaurant. He glanced up, and for half a second, something unguarded crossed his face. "Beautiful," he said simply. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and that unguarded expression vanished behind something colder, sharper. "We need to go," he said. "Now." The messages started 3 days after the restaurant. "You look beautiful in that green dress. Wish I could have seen it before he bought it for you." I blocked the number. He texted from a different one, then another, then another. By day 5, I'd blocked 7 different numbers, and my hands shook every time my phone buzzed. "You think a restraining order will protect you? You think he will? I know where you work, Natasha. I know your schedule. I know you take the 6 train every morning and get coffee from the place on 42nd. You can't hide from me." He was right. I couldn't hide. But I also couldn't afford to stop living my life just because Kojo had decided terrorizing me was his new hobby. So I went to work. I took the 6 train. I got my coffee on 42nd, even though my heart hammered every time someone walked too close behind me. That's when I started noticing the car. Black sedan, tinted windows, always 3 or 4 cars back, but never quite disappearing. I told myself I was being paranoid. That trauma had rewired my brain to see threats in every shadow. But when I deliberately took a different route home one evening, walked 10 blocks out of my way just to test my theory, the sedan was still there. The night Kojo showed up outside my apartment building, I was ready to call the police. He was standing under the streetlight like some kind of romantic lead in the world's worst movie, holding flowers that looked like he'd stolen them from a gas station. My finger hovered over 911 when I saw it happen. The black sedan pulled up, didn't honk, didn't screech, just glided to a stop between Kojo and the building entrance. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't touch Kojo, didn't say anything I could hear from the 4th-floor window, but Kojo went pale, dropped the flowers, and walked away so fast he was practically running. The man got back in the sedan and drove off like nothing had happened. I stood at my window for 20 minutes, shaking, not from fear, from something worse. The knowledge that I was being watched, protected, monitored, that somewhere out there, someone was keeping track of me with the kind of resources that turned my stalker into a fleeing coward with nothing but a look. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. My stomach dropped, but it wasn't Kojo. "You're safe now. Get some sleep." I should have been grateful. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt like the walls of my apartment were suddenly made of glass, like privacy was something I'd traded without signing a contract. That night, I dreamed about wine stains and silk handkerchiefs, about a smile that promised violence, about the difference between a cage made of fists and a cage made of protection. When I woke up, I Googled Koo Majok. The search results made me wish I'd stayed asleep. The first 3 search results for Koo Majok were legitimate. Real estate developer, philanthropist, a photo of him at some charity gala looking exactly like the man who'd bought me a dress and made my stalker disappear. The 4th result was a Reddit thread titled, "The Real Koo Majok, What the Media Won't Tell You." I shouldn't have clicked it. I should have closed my laptop and pretended I'd never looked. But my finger was already moving, and once I started reading, I couldn't stop. Consolidation. That's what they called it when smaller criminal organizations suddenly folded into larger ones. When rival gangs stopped being rivals and started being employees. When the violence got quieter, cleaner, more organized. When someone like Koo Majok decided the chaos was bad for business. The news segment I found buried on page 6 was 2 years old. A reporter standing outside a warehouse where 3 bodies had been found, speaking in that careful tone journalists use when they can't prove anything but want you to read between the lines. Sources say this is the latest in a series of territorial consolidations linked to businessman Koo Majok, though no charges have been filed. No charges, no convictions, just a trail of warehouses and business acquisitions, and people who used to cause problems suddenly becoming very, very quiet. I called him. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Natasha, it's late. You're having me followed." Silence. not the guilty kind, the calculating kind. I'm keeping you safe, he said finally, without asking me. Would you have said yes? The honesty of it hit me harder than any lie would have. That's not the point. You don't get to just decide that I need protection and then shadow my entire life like I'm some kind of like you're some kind of what? His voice was still calm, but there was something sharp underneath it now. Like you're worth protecting, like your ex-boyfriend violating a restraining order and showing up outside your apartment isn't a credible threat, like I'm property. The word came out louder than I meant it to, like I'm something to be managed and controlled, and my voice cracked. I already had someone who treated me like that. I don't need another one. The silence that followed felt like falling. I'm coming over, Koo said quietly. Don't. I'm already in the car. We're having this conversation face to face, not over the phone. He paused. And Natasha, I'm not Kojo. Don't insult us both by pretending there's any comparison. He hung up before I could respond. 15 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Koo Majok was standing in my hallway in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, looking at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. May I come in? He asked. Such a small question, such enormous consequences. I stepped aside and let him in. The conversation in my apartment lasted 2 hours and resolved nothing except this. Ko wasn't going to stop protecting me, and I wasn't going to stop hating that I needed protection in the first place. We'd reached what he called an impasse, and what I called agreeing to disagree, while one person has all the actual power. 3 days later, he called with an invitation that sounded more like a summons. I'm having dinner with some associates tonight. I'd like you to join us. Associates, I repeated. You mean the people who make problems disappear? I mean the people I trust. A pause. I want them to meet you. The restaurant made the first one look like a chain diner. Private room. Table that could seat 20, but only held 8. Every person who stood when I walked in moved with the same controlled precision as the men who'd removed Kojo from my life. But it was the way they looked at me that made my breath catch. Not like I was Koo's date. Not like I was some random woman he'd brought along. Like I was someone who mattered. Someone who belonged. Natasha, Koo said, his hand settling on the small of my back. These are my people. The introductions blurred together. Marcus, who handled acquisitions. Yuki, who managed logistics. An older woman named Diane, who apparently ran the consulting division and looked at me like she was already planning my wardrobe for the next 5 years. They didn't ask me what I did for a living. They didn't make small talk about the weather. Instead, Diane asked me about the restraining order like it was a business problem that needed solving. 8 months, she said, shaking her head. And the police did what exactly? Told me to call if he got violent again. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Again, Marcus echoed. He glanced at Koo. So there's documentation. Enough to put him away if he violates the order, I said carefully. Not enough to make him stop existing in my general vicinity. That, Yuki said with a slight smile, can be arranged. The casual way she said it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. The knowledge that these people, these strangers, cared more about my safety than any police officer I'd spoken to. Koo's hand found mine under the table. The dinner lasted 3 hours. Somewhere between the second course and dessert, I realized I was laughing. Actually laughing, telling a story about Kojo showing up to my workplace, dressed like he was auditioning for a rap video. And these people, these dangerous, powerful people, were listening like my humiliation mattered. When we finally left, Diane hugged me. Actually hugged me, like I was family instead of some woman who'd gotten wine thrown on her 2 weeks ago. You're good for him, she whispered. Don't let that stubborn fool push you away. In the car, Koo was quiet. Your people are intense, I said finally. He smiled, just barely. They liked you. How do you know? Because you're still breathing, and they're already planning how to eliminate your problem permanently. I stayed late at work on purpose. Told myself it was because I needed to finish the quarterly reports. Told myself it had nothing to do with the fact that going home meant being alone with my thoughts about dinner with Koo's family. The parking garage was nearly empty when I finally left. Just my car and maybe 3 others scattered across 2 floors. My heels echoed against concrete as I walked, keys already in my hand, the way my self-defense instructor had taught me. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Natasha. I didn't turn around, didn't need to. Kojo's voice had been the soundtrack to 2 years of my life. I knew every inflection, every tone that preceded violence. Restraining order says you need to stay 500 feet away, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. You're violating it right now. You think I care about a piece of paper? He was closer now. I could smell the cologne he always wore too much of. You think your new boyfriend scares me? My hand found my phone, emergency dial ready. But Kojo moved faster than I remembered, grabbing my wrist hard enough to make me drop it. The phone clattered across concrete, screen shattering. We're going to talk, he said, pulling me toward the stairwell. You're going to listen, and you're going to remember who you belonged to before you. The voice that cut him off came from the shadows between 2 support pillars. Let her go. Marcus stepped into the fluorescent light, and I finally understood what Diane had meant about eliminating problems permanently. This wasn't the man in the expensive suit who'd asked me thoughtful questions over dinner. This was something else entirely, something that moved like violence had a physical form. Kojo's grip on my wrist loosened. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerning her concerns me. Marcus walked forward, and I noticed he wasn't alone. 2 other men materialized from the darkness, boxing Kojo in. You were told to leave the city. You were told what would happen if you didn't. You can't just... Kojo started. Marcus moved so fast I almost missed it. 1 second Kojo was standing. The next he was on his knees. Marcus's hand wrapped around the back of his neck like he was a disobedient dog. Say goodbye, Natasha, Marcus said calmly. You won't be seeing him again. The cold certainty in his voice made my stomach drop. Wait. This, Kojo spat at me, blood trickling from his mouth. This is who you're choosing? These animals? Marcus's grip tightened. Kojo made a sound I'd never heard him make before. Fear. Stop. I heard myself say, please. I don't want. Marcus looked at me then, and his expression was almost kind. Go home, Natasha. We'll handle this. Handle it how? He smiled. It was nothing like Koo's smile in the restaurant. This one had teeth. However, Mr. Majok decides. Marcus drove me to Koo's building. Not my apartment. Not home. To the high-rise where the top 3 floors belonged to a man who'd just decided my ex-boyfriend's fate without consulting me. I should have been angry. Should have demanded to go home. Instead, I let Marcus escort me to a private elevator that required a key card and took me to the 47th floor. Koo was waiting on the rooftop terrace. The city sprawled below us, a million lights pretending the world was beautiful instead of dangerous. He was leaning against the railing, still in his suit, tie loosened like he'd been up here for hours. You stopped, Marcus, he said without turning around. I stopped him from killing someone in front of me. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. There's a difference. Is there? Now he turned, and in the ambient light from the city, his face looked almost vulnerable, almost human. Because the way I see it, you have 2 choices, Natasha. 1, I make Kojo disappear, permanently. No trial, no appeals, no chance he ever hurts you again. Or 2, we do this your way, legally, slowly, with all the risks that come with letting a man like him stay breathing. Those aren't choices. That's you asking permission to commit murder. I'm asking what you can live with. He moved closer, close enough that I could see the wine stains still faintly visible on his collar from 2 weeks ago. I've been watching you try to be strong enough to fight him alone, watching you flinch every time your phone buzzes, watching you look over your shoulder like the world is hunting you. Because it is. Not anymore. His hand came up, hovering near my face but not touching. You have me now. You have my resources, my people, my protection. But I need to know, what kind of protection do you want? The kind that keeps your hands clean, or the kind that lets you stand beside me when we end this? The weight of the question settled over me like the night air. Tell me about yourself, I said instead. The real you. Not the businessman in the charity gala photos. Not the mob boss from the Reddit threads. You. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or relief. My father built an empire on fear, he said quietly. I rebuilt it on loyalty. I don't hurt people because I enjoy it, Natasha. I hurt people because it's the only language some people understand. And your ex, his jaw tightened. He's fluent. I want him gone, I heard myself say. But I want to be the one who does it. Not with violence, not with your people disappearing him in the night. I want him to lose everything the way he tried to make me lose everything. I want justice, Koo, not revenge. He smiled then, the same smile from the restaurant, the one that promised violence wrapped in control. Then let's give you justice. The plan came to me at 3 in the morning, lying in Koo's guest room because he'd refused to let me go home alone after the garage incident. I'd been staring at the ceiling, replaying every restraining order violation, every threatening text, every time Kojo had proven that the legal system was just paper and good intentions. That's when I realized paper and good intentions were exactly what I needed. I found Koo in his office, still dressed, still awake, surrounded by documents that probably detailed things I didn't want to know about. I need him to kidnap me, I said. He looked up slowly, like I just suggested we set ourselves on fire. Explain. The restraining order violations aren't enough. Harassment charges won't stick because he's always careful about what he says. But kidnapping? Attempted kidnapping with witnesses and evidence? That's a felony. That's real prison time. I moved closer to his desk, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I need to give him the opportunity. I need to make him think he can take me, and when he tries, we document everything. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to end this. My voice didn't shake. He's never going to stop, Koo. You know that. Your people can follow him forever, but the second they're not watching, he'll be there. Unless we make him do something so undeniable, so documented, that even the best lawyer in the world can't save him. Koo stood, came around the desk, and for a long moment just looked at me. You understand what you're suggesting? You'd be putting yourself in his hands, letting him think he's won. For about 90 seconds until your people move in. I held his gaze. I've been his victim for 2 years. I'm done being a victim. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. You'll wear a wire. Marcus and Yuki will be within 20 feet at all times. The second he touches you, the second he tries to force me into a vehicle, I corrected. We need intent. We need him on record saying he's taking me somewhere against my will. We need it airtight. And if something goes wrong, then you do what you wanted to do from the beginning. I moved closer, close enough to see my reflection in his eyes. But it won't go wrong, because I know him, Koo. I know exactly what to say to make him feel like he's won. I know how to make him overconfident enough to confess everything. He reached out, his hand cupping my face with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man who'd built an empire on fear. You're terrifying, he said softly. I learned from the best. When? Tomorrow night. I'll text him from a new number. Tell him I'm leaving you, that I'm scared, that I need to talk to him alone one last time. I smiled, and it felt like power. He'll come running, and we'll be waiting. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from my apartment, public enough to feel safe, isolated enough for Kojo to think he had an opportunity. I sat by the window in a white dress. Deliberate choice. White, like the wine that had started this whole thing. White, because I wanted him to see me as the victim he remembered. The wire tape between my shoulder blades felt like a promise. He showed up exactly when I knew he would. Desperate men are punctual. He looked thinner, more manic, like obsession had been eating him from the inside out. Natasha, he slid into the seat across from me. You came. I'm tired, Kojo. I made my voice small, broken. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of him controlling everything. His eyes lit up. I knew it. I knew you'd realize. But I can't do this here. There are cameras. His people are probably watching. I leaned forward, let my hand touch his across the table. Can we go somewhere? Somewhere we can really talk? My car's around the corner. Perfect. Okay, I whispered. But we have to be quick. The walk to his car felt like slow motion. Every step was a choice. Every breath was a decision to see this through. Marcus was in the coffee shop pretending to read a newspaper. Yuki was across the street at a bus stop. I couldn't see the others, but I knew they were there. Kojo opened the passenger door. Chivalry from a monster. I hesitated at the threshold. Let him think I was scared. It's okay, baby, he said, and the endearment made my skin crawl. We're just going to talk. just like old times. Where are we going? I asked, loud enough for the wire to catch it. Somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find us. His hand pressed against my lower back, pushing me toward the seat. Somewhere I can remind you who you really belong to. I don't want to. His grip tightened, the mask slipped. Get in the car, Natasha. We're done playing games. And there it was, the threat, the force, the intent. Say it, I said quietly, not moving. Say what you're going to do. I'm taking you away from here, from him, from this whole fucking city if I have to. His fingers dug into my arm. You're mine, and it's time you remembered. The car doors opened simultaneously. Marcus on the driver's side, Yuki on mine. Two more men appeared from nowhere, surrounding Kojo with the same surgical precision they'd used at the restaurant. But this time, I stayed standing, dry, composed. Kojo's face went white as the police cruiser pulled up, as Detective Morrison stepped out with handcuffs and a smile, as he realized that every word, every threat, every touch had been recorded. You set me up, he whispered. I ended it, I corrected. Koo's car pulled up behind the cruiser. He stepped out wearing a suit that cost more than Kojo's life, and when he looked at me, there was nothing but pride in his eyes. I walked past Kojo without another word, took Koo's offered hand, and finally walked away from the woman who'd been soaked in wine and shame. I was someone new now, someone who smiled back